Shepherd's pie. It's a classic for a reason, and did you know the only difference between a shepherd's pie and a cottage pie is a shepherd's pie is lamb mince and a cottage pie is beef mince. Anyway, great way to feed a whole bunch of people at once. Let's get stuck in. But one of the beauties of this dish is you can kind of use whatever veg you need to use up in your fridge, apart from the three basics. So onion, carrots, celery, and I'm gonna add some corn into mine because I've got some manky old corn that needs using up, bit of garlic and some herbs. Pretty simple. All we're gonna do to start with is dice these onions nice and fine, peel and dice our carrots nice and fine, and dice our celery nice and fine. Hot tip for when you're cutting corn, get a little bowl like this, upside down on a plate, put your corn on it, and then run your blade down. And then corn goes everywhere. Usually helps if you have something with sides, which will stop that corn going everywhere. But I've put myself in this predicament, so we'll carry on. All right, we've got our veg sorted. Let's just get our garlic cut up now. And if you're someone that struggles with using a knife, you've got a disability or you're short of time, dare I say it, you can also use a food processor because this is all gonna cook down for a while anyway. Now, I only suggest using that if you kind of struggle. Otherwise, I think, you know, when we talk about having love in food, that's the type of thing we're talking about, taking the time to cut it all properly, but don't let it stop you from cooking. Same with garlic. Don't buy that pre-stuffed done garlic. It's no good. Doesn't take long. Peel your garlic, run a knife through it, job done. And finally, our hard herbs. So we've got some rosemary and some thyme. If you can't get fresh, then use dried, but fresh is always better. All right, first thing we're gonna do is brown off our meat. So get a nice big heavy base pot over a high heat, good glug of oil on the bottom. Especially if your mince is lean, you can see if it doesn't have too many white flecks, then don't be afraid to get some oil in there. Let that come to temperature, and then we're gonna do it, this is 1.5 kilos of lamb. We're gonna do it in kind of 3 batches, so 500 gram batches, get some good color on it before we place it in here. Then we'll sweat our veg down and add everything back. But did you know that the shepherd's pie, which is it's kind of English, maybe Scottish, there's a bit of argument about that, like most dishes, people argue over it, but it was made from the shepherds with their leftover lamb pieces, or lamb roasts, I guess, and it traditionally had a layer of pastry on the bottom. Now that layer of pastry has since disappeared from the dish in most cases that I've seen. I've actually never seen it made with a layer of pastry, but it's pretty interesting at how kind of dishes evolve over time. It's also a really affordable dish. This amount of food will easily feed 8 people, and if you want to make it even more affordable, then do the beef version, because beef mince is normally cheaper than lamb mince. But if you're doing it with beef mince, that's when you're technically making a cottage pie. All right, we're up to temperature. Get our lamb in there. Season it with a pinch of salt, and then don't touch it. Just let it start to kind of get nice and brown on that bottom part before you start moving it around and losing the heat in your pan. So this here is what you're looking for. Nice browning on the bottom. Now you're not gonna get it all over the meat. It's gonna take way too long and it's home cooking. But if you get a good base layer of it before you start mixing, it'll really help with the depth of flavor. So once all your mince is broken up and you're starting to get some good color, you're gonna pull this out, trying to leave all the fat in the pan, and then we'll repeat with the rest of the mince 2 more times. All right, last batch of lamb coming out. We're gonna keep all that fat in there. We might take some of it out because it's quite a bit. We don't need it all. You know what, we're gonna leave it in. I know it looks like a lot, but I reckon that'll be all right. But feel free, if you wanna pull some of that out, do so. Next up, heat back on, kind of medium high, and we'll get the onions in and the carrots at the same time. Just gonna sweat that down for 2 to 3 minutes. Want a little bit of color, but nothing crazy. All right, a couple of minutes later, and you can see they're starting to soften. They've gone nice and golden. And we're gonna add our celery, dunk, and our garlic, dunk. We're also gonna add our hard herbs, so our rosemary and thyme. We're gonna save the corn till later, because I kind of like it when corn gets cooked out too much. I like a little bit of like that real sweetness that comes through when you get like a nicely cooked piece of corn. So we'll put that in right at the end. A couple of tablespoons of tomato puree, Worcestershire sauce, I'm gonna say about 12 dashes, and a couple of heaped tablespoons of flour. Now, if you're a celiac or you don't eat wheat or someone in your family doesn't eat wheat, leave the flour out at this point and we can thicken the sauce with corn flour and water slurry later, but you do that once it's all mixed together. Stir that flour through, that'll absorb any of that extra fat that's lying around. Pretty important to try and cook the flour out at this point too. It's gonna kind of look a bit gloopy and weird, but it'll come together, I promise. Don't set your tea towel on fire like I just did either. I don't know how many times I've seen in commercial kitchens, chefs catching their tea towels on fire. It's pretty funny. All right, lamb back in. Save this dish. We're obviously going to need it to build the pie in later. So a little bit of oil on the bottom is not too much of an issue. Stir that lamb through all that veg, so it's relatively evenly distributed. You're going to see it's going to be sticking to the bottom here, which is fine. It'll come off when we start adding our liquid. You can use chicken stock, you can use lamb stock if you have some, beef stock, and that goes, and stir it through. All right, stir that stock through. You should start thicken up, which is what we're looking for. And at this point, we don't need to cook this for hours. You can, by all means, cook it for as long as you want, to be perfectly honest. But this is the kind of consistency we're looking for. We want to kind of hold together, but not be too crazy. So I'm just going to turn that temperature down. We'll put the corn in, kind of like I was saying, close to the end. We'll only give it about 2 or 3 minutes to cook in here, and then we'll let it cook mainly when it's in the dish, in the oven, when it's covered in potato. But before we get those potatoes, let's have a taste. Okay. The importance, one thing home cooks often don't grasp is how much chefs taste food. We literally taste all day long, and it's really important. We've seasoned that all the way through. It still needs a bit more salt. I don't want to season it to the complete point of completion. Complete point of completion. That was a tongue twister. It doesn't even make sense. I do want to make sure that it's tasting like it should as far as seasoning is concerned. So another big pinch of salt, and I am going to start adding some pepper. Nothing too much. Nothing too much. Why can't I talk today? Stir that through, and then we'll let it do its thing. But the moral of the story is taste your food. Taste as you're going all the way through. Make sure it's tasting as it should do. And season all the way through when you're cooking. There's no just point dumping a bunch of salt on at the end, because it won't really penetrate the cells. That's not even true, I don't think. You're just talking rubbish now, Andrew. Season your food all the way through the cooking, not just at the start and not just at the end. Potatoes. These are Sebago potatoes. You want a potato that's good for mashing, like a Sebago. I already peeled these, but you kind of want to cut them in half. You don't want too smaller pieces when you're doing mashed potatoes. I often see people doing that as well. What I find is when you have too smaller pieces is that potatoes take on too much water, and then your mash doesn't taste like potato. It just gets kind of watery. Cut your potatoes into, I guess, fist-sized pieces, smallish fist-sized pieces. Onto the heat. This is cold water. Always start your veggies in the veggies that grow underground in cold water. Season your potatoes, and we'll let those come up and cook until they're fork tender. All right, potatoes have been on for about 25 minutes, and when I said before fork tender, this is what I mean. You can put a knife in them, and they do just kind of slip back off. Let's get these drained. Ooh. And then just leave them in the colander over the pot for 3 to 4 minutes to steam. What that steam's going to do is take away any of the extra moisture that's there. Before we deal to our mash, just put our corn in with our lamb. Heat's off now too. The residual heat of this, and then the heat it's going to get once it's kind of baking in the oven, we'll cook that corn. You can also do frozen peas, kind of a bit of a classic, the old frozen peas in here. All right, potatoes, wink. I'm just going to use a ricer. You can just use a masher if you want, or a moolie, whatever you got. Then to that, big blob of nut butter, like of milk. You don't want this mash super wet, so just kind of go easy with the milk at the start, and a pinch of salt. Just work that butter and that milk into that mash. Okay, time to start assembling. We've got our tray, or our oven-safe dish from before. Add in our meat mix. Meat mix, that's not really a flattering way of describing it, is it? Our delicious stewed lamb that we've tasted and seasoned correctly. Spread that out evenly. And then we're gonna get our mash on. Now the trick is with the mash is to put into small pieces like that, and then you want lots of like cravats and, you know, undulation, like the hills of the Alps, or I should say the Highlands of Scotland, really. And the reason you want all that lovely undulation is because it gives nice little bits that get all toasty when they go in the oven. If Mitch was to Kernel, it'll be like that. Look at all that undulation. I do like to make sure the edges are kind of nice and firmly up against the side. But I like it when dishes like this, like lasagna and pies like this, they kind of spill over a bit. I think it makes it homely, doesn't it? A little extra step that I like to do, you definitely don't need to do this. I like to finely grate some pecorino over the top, or parmesan. I prefer pecorino. This gives it a nice kind of bit of tang. Also adds to the golden brown delicious look. Really fill up some of those undulations. It's the word of the day. And then a little bit of panko breadcrumb, and that gives you a nice crusty top. Nice bit of texture. To the oven. All right, oven's on 180 degrees. Fahrenheit temperature will be here. We're gonna cook that for about 35 to 40 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. Stunning. Just gonna let this chill for a minute before I take a bite. I've learnt my lesson. Ooh. Look at that, looks pretty good, doesn't it? It's like a big warm hug. Delicious, meaty, got a lot of different nice textures in there, from the the lamb to the corn, crunchy bit on the top, and then that really nice soft mashed potato. What is not to like about that? And it really is super affordable. I've put in the recipe that this is for 8 people. You could comfortably feed 8 adults with this, no problem at all. Anyway, legends, thank you so much for watching. I hope you took something from this video. I feel like I need another outro because every time I say subscribe, and it's like, I don't think it does anything. But anyway. Tell your friends to watch. Tell your friends to watch, and tell your friends to subscribe, because it really helps us out, and I like making these videos. So anyway, we'll see you next week for another recipe. Peace.